Welcome to the To The Point podcast. Now here's your host for To The Point, John Brake.
Thank you for listening and watching and joining us for To The Point. This is episode 11. I'm John.
And I'm Kelly.
And we're going to jump right into To The Point, episode 11. It's November. It's almost the end of the year.
Yeah, November. To The Point, episode 11. I had a friend one time that told us in deer season that he killed an 11-point buck. And we said, really? So we drove over to see it. And it was just a spike. It had two straight horns. He goes, yeah, that's an 11.
That's the 11.
That's an 11. Yeah. And so I'm like, it fits for us today to talk about that. So
that's right. Whenever Creed 2 came out, they used the Roman numeral, and I kept calling it Creed 11 and confusing everybody I would talk about movies with. They're like, what?
There will likely be a Creed 11.
Yeah,
but
we'll get
not
there.
Yet.
They skipped it. It's like so good that they don't need the other sequels, is what I kept saying. They just jump from 1 to 11.
Yeah.
Well, this one goes to 11.
It'll be like Star Wars. They'll do the fourth one first.
Yeah,
we've already talked about Star Wars, haven't we?
I think so, but hey,
why not?
Might as well. So this month, of course, is the month of Thanksgiving, and that's kind of on our minds. That's sort of where we're at as a culture, as a church, and so we thought that today we should talk about gratitude. So where do you want to start with that?
Yeah, man. By the time this drops, you have probably already seen your entire social media feed just filled up with day one of Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's right.
Day two I'm thankful for. And that's not a bad practice. I think there's some health that's involved in that. But I really think that we need to kind of look at gratitude more deeply, because I feel like in our culture, the way it is today, we've really kind of lost a strong sense at all of what really practicing and living in gratitude daily means. It's cool that we have a day that we set aside that we call Thanksgiving, but really, scripturally, if we think about what God's calling us to, gratitude needs to be an aspect of our character every day, and not really just in moments of the day, but throughout the day, all the time. But we kind of live in a world that doesn't really understand how to do gratitude consistently.
And that's why we need a built-in cultural reminder in the form of a holiday to say, hey, remember, be thankful. And we talked about that a couple months ago with we were talking about some spiritual discipline stuff. And we mentioned giving thanks to God as being one of being a spiritual discipline. I feel like it's something that we overlook because it seems simple. When we think of spiritual disciplines, we think of difficult things like fasting.
Right.
But just the simple giving thanks to God daily, that practice of living in gratitude. And I think I mentioned this too on that podcast, that I had a journal at one point. It was called the 5-minute journal. And it started out with list 3 things that you're grateful for. And it just changes your perspective. That wasn't even a Christian thought. That's just a normal kind of everyday journal that knows just the benefits, the psychological benefits, the emotional benefits of keeping your perspective on being grateful and being thankful. And I think it's an important thing for us to cultivate outside of this holiday, but this holiday gives us a reason to really get on that soapbox and kind of shout that out.
And I'm thankful, I'm grateful, John, that we have a day in our culture where we can sit back and we can think about what we have to be thankful for. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to slam Thanksgiving and make people feel like it is somehow not good enough as a holiday. It's a great holiday, one of my favorite holidays. It's just the practice of gratitude and living in that gratitude is something that we need to learn to cultivate. One of the reasons we've got to learn how to cultivate is because as a culture, we're driven away from gratitude.
Yeah.
One of the things that marketing exists, and one of their primary weapons as marketers to get us to buy things is to create a sense of disequilibrium, of inequity, of lack, and so that we never feel like we have what we need.
Right. Companies need problems to solve, and a lot of times we create those problems so we can buy their solution.
Right, absolutely. And so everything about marketing, and before we even talk about social media or anything like that, everything about marketing is designed to create that internal resistance, that internal stress, that something is missing in your life, whatever that something may be. And then again, there's that problem. How do we resolve that? Well, we go buy the new this, we go buy the new that. It's looking at the car that runs effectively and efficiently, but it's been door dinged in Walmart parking lot a couple times,
right?
And now for some reason it's just not good enough for us. Rather than looking at that car as the miracle that it is. One of the things that I think makes it so hard for us is not only do we live in one of the most prosperous nations of all time, we live in an era that is exceedingly prosperous. I mean, what it means to be in poverty now in the United States of America is what the wealthiest people lived like a few hundred years ago. Or actually it's even better, and I'm not trying to say that poverty isn't serious and that it doesn't affect people. I'm just saying that our level of prosperity is so high right now that it really confuses us about things. We think about Thanksgiving, just talking about Thanksgiving. One of the things that happened at almost everybody's Thanksgiving that I know, is they have way too much to eat. And so there's the overeating and the overindulgence, and everybody laughs about, taking that big tryptophan nap in the afternoon because you've had so much turkey and that kind of thing. It wasn't very long ago that wasn't a problem that everybody had to deal with. It was kind of relegated to a few people who were blessed enough to be able to afford to have that meal.
It was mostly the opposite, that there wasn't enough to go around.
There wasn't enough. And so because of that, this idea that not everybody has that all the time is foreign to us. Yeah. And so, and just by the way, this is one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we get involved in missions work. Not just foreign missions, because we certainly have a lot of people, that are in our own community, that are in our own country, our state, that are probably impoverished, that are facing some very challenging situations and circumstances. We just don't see them. But if you get involved with our food pantry, for example, if you get involved with one of our trips, you could go with Out of the Ashes and check out Ethiopia. You could go with us when we go down to Mexico, down there at Cuatro Cienecas, with Eddie Jones's organization. When we go do those things, you experience people who live in a deep and profound poverty. You get involved with Convoy of Hope, who we partner with. You can see, wow, not everybody has it as good as we do. There are still some big needs, but that's uncomfortable. And so a lot of times we try to avoid that. We find reasons not to do that, or we're too busy, or, well, we can't afford to take a mission trip. Now we can afford to go to Cancun, just not the bad part of Cancun.
Yeah.
And that's the way a lot of people live. But for me, this is kind of a really personal thing. Because, and I think I've shared on here before, but the first few years of ministry, when we were part of a church plant in Olathe, Kansas, love that church, love Pastor John Mara, and so thankful for everything that they poured into us. But as a church plant, we didn't have a lot of money for staff, and I was just blessed and fortunate to be part-time on staff there. But while we were there, Bridget and I really, really struggled a lot. Because it was more expensive to live in Kansas City, particularly in Johnson County where we were, and we had kids after 3 years of marriage, and if you don't know, kids are expensive.
Yeah, I'm starting to find that out. My kids are to that age.
Yeah, but so in order just to kind of make things work for us, I had to work another job, which there's no shame in that at all. But I had to work another job, and I was pouring concrete, and with my family, my wife's family, my father-in-law, my brother-in-law, awesome people. If you're listening to this, I love you, but I did not love that job. It was a situation where, particularly this time of year when it's kind of wintry and cold outside, when it's raining outside, if you're working concrete, you're working in the weather. One of my jobs on the site was when we'd have to dig footings. When we'd have to dig, we would make these really incredible basketball courts for people, very, very wealthy people. I'd have to go in there and clean out those holes, clean out those footings. And so I ended up spending a lot of time on my belly, leaning into these holes, digging out the dirt by hand, because they had to be just right so they would pass inspection. And a lot of times, dirt and stuff would fall in. And I just remember thinking to myself so much of the day, I hate this. And I hate this situation. And I hate that I have to wake up and do this 2 or 3 or 4 days a week sometimes. And I hate that I can't get paid for a full-time job. And I started to resent everything.
Yeah.
I started to resent the job. I started to resent, not my family, but I started to resent the situation. Why couldn't I be full-time? Why couldn't this happen? Why couldn't that happen? Why do I have to be on my face in the dirt, in the mud, in the cold? Why do I have to be wet all day because it's raining?
Just to make ends meet.
To make ends meet. This is not the way life should be. And I became, in those situations, I would get very negative. I would get very depressed. And I mean, it was just, I wasn't happy at all. And then things would happen. Like a lot of people don't know this, but when Ryder was little, he was sick. He's asthmatic, and he had his first asthma attack at 18 months and scared us to death. But we were having to go to the doctors, and it turns out he's allergic to everything. And so we were having to buy all this medication, and we didn't have insurance. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't afford it. And so we had to pay for everything out of pocket, and it was so expensive. We got to these situations where, there was just no way we could do it. And as I was complaining about this one day to a friend of mine, he goes, "Man, aren't you thankful that you could afford to buy that medication? Because you may not have a nice car, because I didn't, and you may not be able to go on the trips that you'd want to go on, and you may not, be able to live in a house. We lived in HUD housing, low income housing. You may be in this situation, but can you imagine what it would be like if you couldn't provide the medication that your son needed?" And I was like, yeah, wow. And so when he started asking me those questions, he started steering me back to gratitude. He started steering me back to, Kelly, you've been blessed, and you're just overlooking that.
Yeah.
And that began to change things for me. And I had to learn to discipline myself. And so when I found myself leaning over in those holes, digging the dirt out with my hands, getting dirty and facing the mud, all those kind of things, I started praying, God, thank you that I have this opportunity to work a job that's flexible so I can continue to do ministry. God, thank you for the opportunity to do ministry in a church plant and kind of break new ground and establish, patterns within this church that can make a difference, down the line. God, thank you for a wife who's willing to work so hard, not only to support me, but to raise our kids. And God, thank you for a healthy body that can get behind a shovel and that can move all this concrete. And God, thank you that I have the energy to work, 30 hours a week in concrete and 30 to 40 hours a week in ministry. God, thank you. I mean, and I just started making that thankfulness a part of my regular day, a part of my regular routine. And it really did change everything. Like, I'll just say full blown, I was depressed, and it would take that depression away. In times whenever I've been upset with my wife and just so frustrated, when I start taking time to be grateful for her and the things that she does for me and the way that she has loved me in the past and the vows that she's given me to stay with me forever, when I start thanking God for her instead of complaining about the things that I wish would be different or whatever, not that there's anything I'd really want to be different, Bridget, but whenever I do
she's not listening.
You're probably right. If you are, but whenever I do that, it would change my whole attitude, not just about my situation, but about her, and then that positivity, that gratitude begins to overflow into the other areas of my life. And that for me, so this is my personal testimony. For me, that was one of those things where I've always particularly when things get difficult and get hard. It's there's an old song my grandma used to sing: "Count your blessings, name them one by one. Count your blessings, see what God has done."
It's a Church of Christ song.
Is it really? Okay.
That was one.
It was just a good song,
Yeah.
But in James it says that every good and perfect gift comes down from the Father of the heavenly lights. So when we think about this, if you've ever had anything good in your life at all, anything good,
it's a blessing.
It's more than just a blessing. It's a gift from God.
Yeah.
From God, no other source. It's from Him. If it's good, if it's perfect, if you've ever sat down and looked at a sunset and thought, man, that is beautiful. Not only is the color that you're seeing a gift from God to grace your eyes, the feeling that you get from that serenity is also a gift that comes along with it. And to acknowledge one and not acknowledge the other is missing an opportunity. And so to understand these things, we have to sit back and go, wow, look at what kind of blessings do I have, and acknowledge where they come from. And then why does God do that? Oh yeah, it's because He loves me.
Yeah.
He loves me with my bad attitude. He loves me with my propensity towards envy. He loves me with this broken way that I think and this pitiful, selfish attitude that says, well, how come I have this vehicle that runs and drives, but I don't have that vehicle that runs and drives and is a little more shiny? Those kind of things where God can kind of invade our space and change our thinking if we allow Him to. That's why Paul says, be thankful in all things.
Yeah. But it is a situation where it's another situation where we have to surrender. We have to let go of our ideas of what should be, or our ideas of what culture tells us should be, or all of that stuff. We have to be able to let go. And, you can't change your circumstances necessarily always on your own, but you can change your perspective. Right. And whenever you are able to surrender that over to God, and God grants you with a new perspective, and you're able in the muck, in the mire of doing whatever work you're doing, whatever trial you're going through, to still find joy in that, and to still find gratitude and give that. I mean, that's the whole book of Philippians. That was, you were talking, I was just thinking about that, like you were digging out, you were, whatever you said you were doing, you were digging out footings. Yeah. Footings. I don't know things, but you were digging those out and doing that hard labor, but you weren't in prison. You weren't beat up, worried if you were going to die. Right. There's a whole lot of freedom that we have even in what seems like our prison. Yeah. And I was also listening to a podcast recently that was talking about where the church has failed to encourage people in their vocations, just talking about vocational ministry. And it was basically talking about, we spend, 80% of our time at our jobs. And a lot of the times the church's perspective is, that's not your identity. You're not what you do, but your identity is in Christ. But then that stops there. Yeah. So how do we support them? They're still spending the majority of their time there. They probably don't like it. There's a lot of people that are like you, who don't like that they have to spend 60 hours a week doing multiple jobs, trying to make ends meet and all that stuff. And so just sort of putting it out there as like a nice sentiment, oh yeah, be grateful for what you have. It's different than when you tell your testimony, when you share your life with them, when you encourage them in that, to say, hey, your perspective can make the difference in this. And when you have God, when you have a relationship with Jesus, that perspective of who you are in Him isn't just some nice sounding words. It can actually change your life.
It absolutely can change your life. And here's why it changed your life. When we give God gratitude, when we give God appreciation, that is an aspect of worship. And worship is always, if it's authentic worship, it is always transformational. Right. It transforms our minds. It absolutely will transform our bodies. Whenever we do tests on people who, like blood pressure when you're grateful and appreciative of the things around you rather than annoyed by everything that you don't have and things not going your way, your blood pressure goes down. It's healthier.
Yeah.
And so when we worship God in these ways, it helps us in every possible measure. It creates situations where people want to be around us, because guess what? If you are negative Nelly and you're griping and complaining about everything that's going on in your life and nothing's ever happy, people want to distance themselves, rightfully so, which you will probably also complain about.
Yeah. Why does nobody want to be around me? Whatever.
It's just that ever descending spiral cycle. And that's where it gets you. However, taking that step up and having gratitude. Now, let's be clear on something though. It's more than just saying, thankful for my job, thankful for my health, thankful for my wife. Those are true things. We should be thankful for those things. It's more than just saying it. It's taking time to actually get into the why.
Yeah.
I am thankful for this job. Again, back to when I was pouring concrete and working construction. I'm thankful for this job, not because I like it, not because I want to do that work. I'm thankful that it provides money so I can buy medicine my son needs so he can be healthy and live.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for the fact that I can put groceries in the refrigerator. I'm thankful for the fact that there's air conditioning and heat going on in my house when I need it. Mm-hmm. I'm thankful for a woman who, whenever I'm an idiot, doesn't run out the door.
Yeah.
And yes, there have been those times.
I'm thankful for that.
But just taking time, not just say, oh, I'm thankful, but to really get into why.
Yeah.
There's a difference between making a statement and then being connected to the reality of why you're making that statement. Not because we can say all kinds of things we don't mean. Mm-hmm. We can say all kinds of things that we don't connect with.
Right.
And those things are empty and hollow and have no power.
Yeah.
But when we start really digging into the why are we thankful and really intentionally and forcefully, the Bible says, take captive your thoughts. I love the aggressive language Paul uses there. He says, take captive your thoughts. When we forcefully take captive those thoughts and we wrangle them and we can see the truth of what's really going on, not just the negative perception that we have, not just the poor, pitiful me attitude that we can get that really is driven by envy and ingratitude, but really wrestle those things out and see how God has blessed us, see how good that we really do have it, to see what we really honestly have to be so thankful for.
Yeah.
Man, that changes things. And that's why you do have to take captive those thoughts. That's why you do have to focus your mind on that good, true, beautiful, all those things that Paul directs us to. And that's really part of what that discipline of gratitude is. You talked about spiritual disciplines. Right. That's a thing.
Yeah. I feel like when we learn that discipline of gratitude and we put that kind of first there, the fruit of that is praise and worship by default. And so I love the idea, like, to say it to anybody listening, the encouragement I think would be, when you're practicing gratitude, get specific. Yeah. You have to drill down into it, because it can be a wrestling match with yourself, with God on some things, because we have questions that don't seem like they have answers. Some don't, we don't claim to know every single detail of what God is thinking or doing. Right. But we wrestle with that stuff, and we can still have, I heard this in a message from Pastor Levi Lusko, Fresh Life Church. He's doing a series on 1 Peter, and the last thing he said, was just really powerful. He had like 4 points that he was making in that last one. He said that, when we don't have the answers, when we don't know what God is doing and how God is working in our life, act as though we have it, because on the other side of all of this, we do have that. Right. We have the hope that lies there. Act as though. So when you are practicing gratitude, act as though you feel it, act as though you do it. And then God comes in and he changes that perspective, and it happens. It's like motivation to work out. A lot of times you don't feel like working out till you're already there doing it. Mm-hmm. Getting to the gym is the hardest part of doing the workout. Yeah. And when we act as though, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to make this happen, we get there and we find that we're equipped to do it. We find that we're empowered to do it. Yeah. So that's the same thing with gratitude, and that leads to praise and worship, which leads back to more gratitude, and it turns into this awesome cycle.
It's part of faithful living, faith-filled living. When I say faithful, I don't mean like that consistent thing. That's part of faithfulness, but faith-filled as a part of that is, I'm going to look at my life through the lens of faith. Mm-hmm. And part of that is we have to look at not necessarily the situation we're in now, but we have to believe for what God's going to bring us through and to. At very basic, I did a funeral on Monday. Okay. And wonderful family going through a very, very difficult time, but he was a believer. And so in that situation where grief is still so fresh and so real, it's hard to really, outside of faith, what do we have? Well, we have the fact that Grandpa's not suffering anymore, or we have the fact that now we don't have to watch them slowly pass away anymore, and so we have the relief of that. But there's still this great big hole. There's still this great big hurt. But as believers, we have the hope of heaven,
right?
And because of that, we can sit back and go, I'm so thankful right now.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful for the promise that we have for the future. It's not happened yet, but it's the thing that we look forward to in faith believing. And that gives us the ability to get past the difficulty that we face now. Now, ultimately for all of us, it's heaven to think about. But that's not the only thing we think about. We think about, okay, I'm not at this place yet financially. Maybe you're in your early 20s and you're just starting your work life. I'm not at this place financially, but I'm going to keep working and I'm going to keep doing well. And maybe in 10 years or in 15 years, I'm going to get where I'm at. But I'm going to tell you something. If you're not satisfied at all, if you can't have contentment here, you're not going to be content when you finally do make that salary that you feel like you deserve.
And if you don't cultivate gratitude here, you're not going to be grateful for what you do achieve.
And on top of that, if you don't find contentment with what you have, you will probably engage in behaviors to alleviate that.
Yeah. And
just talking about finances, that's how a lot of people get into debt.
Yeah.
And I say this sometimes. I hear Dave Ramsey. We're Dave Ramsey fans at our house. We spend money we don't have to buy stuff that we don't need to impress people we don't really even like. And that's true. It happens. And the next thing you know, you are upside down in your car and you can't make any progress until you pay off this massive chunk of debt. And it's one more millstone around your neck. And how much of that stuff did you really need just so you could feel better for a minute? We have to have that long view. I'm going to keep doing these things that are clear. God says, work hard, manage your money wisely, give faithfully, see what happens as God blesses you for living according to his plan. Doing that faithfully and being thankful. Paul says, find contentment with godliness is great gain.
Yeah.
Right. But finding those things and living in those things, that leads us to this place of blessing in our life. This is not the prosperity gospel. This is good common sense, though. If we can live those ways, if we can embrace those paths and those practices, gratitude being a central aspect in that. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. If you're thankful and grateful for the vehicle you have, it really takes the temptation away to have to go buy something newer and nicer.
Right.
If you're thankful and grateful for the clothes that you have, it takes the temptation to have to go spend the money at the big box store whenever you could go to the secondhand store and save, like 90% of the cost. It takes that away and gives you the opportunity to live very well with where you're at now. And you never know, you may be at that place where you can afford all those things that you want.
I was just going to say that, you practice that and you learn to it's almost like a stay in your lane kind of thing. When you're looking over here and looking over there, we kind of forget what we have here. And that becomes, there's can't remember who says it, but this philosopher that says,
if it's good, I probably said,
oh yeah. The philosopher Kelly Rhodes said, philosophizer.
Yeah. Philosophizer is probably more accurate.
Wealth exists not in having many possessions, but in having few wants. And I love that sentiment. I love that idea that, I'm really focused in on what I have and what I'm doing, and I'm staying in my lane. And hey, if I want something, if one of the few things that I want and desire and enjoy out of life is this expensive thing or that expensive thing, when I haven't spent all my money and my time and my energy on all this stuff that I don't actually want, I can actually get the thing and appreciate it and have gratitude for that too, even if it is just a physical belonging, But when we do that keeping up with the Joneses thing, when we do that looking over here and over there instead of just looking where we're at, we don't even appreciate the things that we go into debt for, or the things that we, kind of waste our lives trying to achieve. And you talked about grief earlier too. And it's one of those things that gratitude in grief, that's a difficult thing. But I think that whenever you find somebody who's able to do that, it's always an encouragement. Mm-hmm. You're never like, man, that person's messing up their lives because they're experiencing some peace in the middle of that doesn't mean that it takes the grief away and that they no longer feel it just because they're, oh, thank you, God, for whatever they can find in it. And then they don't have grief to deal with. You still go through it, but God gives you the ability to walk through that in gratitude, in thankfulness, with peace beyond our understanding.
One thing that is true, particularly of grief, is that if there's sorrow, it means there was once joy that's been depleted, which points to something to be grateful for. You know, when I lost my grandfather 2 years ago, this month actually, that was a very hard thing for me. That took me through some very difficult times because it's the first time that grief really hit me in such a way that it was so overpowering. I mean, I've lost people I loved before, but that one was unique. And I started thinking, man, I'm so thankful for those times that I had with him. And so one of the ways that I kind of started coming out of that grief was by embracing not the fact that he's gone, and not even the fact that I'll see him one day in heaven, by embracing the fact that we had those times when we prayed together, that we had those times whenever he was able to speak into my life. And just be truly thankful for that, rather than going the other way and just being so ripped and torn because that can't happen anymore.
Right.
It's really a very immature way to kind of even think about life, that we're always going to get everything that we want all the time. And that's the other thing with gratitude. You know, a lot of times, you know, you have young kids, John, and one of their assignments in school will be, you know, write down what you're thankful for. And they'll write down, they're thankful for mom and dad and brother and sister and the dog, and they're thankful for a toy or whatever. And a lot of us never get past that. We'll just write down these little things, but we never get really in depth into why that's so important. And we never really think deeply on that. I think a lot of times we're intimidated or afraid to think deeply, but I think it's absolutely necessary to go on and to overcome that 7 deadly sin of envy, to overcome the way our culture forces us away from gratitude. To live life with contentment is a great gift of God. It's part of the fruit of self-control. Rather than living in that, you know, sin of the flesh called jealousy, which is in envy, which is what ingratitude is all tied to. Yeah,
I agree with that. I think that ingratitude, like we've talked about through, and for those of you who don't know, we've kind of got some of the themes of this from an article that the Gospel Coalition put out, but we actually went kind of way off topic there.
We did.
But that's how it works.
And I'm thankful.
I am thankful for that. It's always better when we do that. You know, it's always better when we have kind of an idea and we let God kind of take it where it needs to be. But we will link this article in there. I think it's probably good reading just for everybody to kind of see gratitude from the perspective of ingratitude, you know, because it really is about combating that, because that noise of, you know, what you have to not be thankful for, what you don't have, what you're going through that's difficult, that noise can be so loud that it stifles out, it puts out God's whisper in our lives, that he's there with us and he's walking us through each step of our life if we're willing to listen, if we're willing to lean in, if we're willing to do the difficult work of gratitude and praise and worship in our daily lives. This is not a Sunday morning thing. This is an everyday thing.
As long as the day ends with why, you should be practicing gratitude.
That's right. That's good. Yeah. And so do you have any other final thoughts on anything from the article or anything that we talked about?
Let's just take this to the people First of all, we're so thankful that you listen and watch this. We've seen increases in downloads every week, increases in views, which is really cool. And we're very, very deeply honored by that. We would be very thankful if you liked this and rated us and shared this so that more people, if To The Point's been a good thing for you to do that, we would be really thankful for your questions. Send them to podcast at lifepointlebanon.com. But here's something we want you to do. We would love to know what you're thankful for. And so maybe you're afraid to post that online or whatever. Send us an email that says, hey, I'm thankful for this. And then tell us why. Or maybe as a part of your 30 days of thankfulness that you're doing, instead of just saying, I'm thankful for my awesome hubby. There's wink, wink, Bridget, you can put that out there. Tell us why. Tell us what, make it a longer post. Tell us why, make it be something not so obvious as well. I'm thankful for carpet on my floor so my feet won't have to be cold in the morning whenever I wake up. Whatever it is, I want to see it. I want to hear it, because here's a cool thing. John, your thankfulness inspires me to look for what I can be thankful for in my life.
And vice versa.
And so we want to encourage that. So let's take our gratitude to a deeper level and share it.
Yeah.
So that would be awesome.
And it's always that question after the first question that will push you to a new depth with that. So that, what are you thankful for? Awesome. Why are you thankful for it? What has God done in your life? What gift has God given you? Because we all have them. God's a great God, and He wants to bring that to us. He wants to give us gifts. He gave us the gift of His Son. Mm-hmm. That's something we can all be thankful for. And to find those little things in our everyday, honestly, the more trivial it may seem, the better, because these are the things that people don't think of, or the things that people overlook, that we don't consider to be things to be grateful for, because they're just there. But if they were taken away, you would notice.
Absolutely.
So, like he said, rate, share, email us, send us anything you got. And we really appreciate you being a part of To The Point, and we are grateful for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the To The Point podcast from LifePoint Church. For more information about LifePoint, visit us on the web at lifepointlebanon.com. Be sure to subscribe and rate this podcast, and be sure to share it with your friends on social media. Thanks for joining us for To The Point.